Hello guys, this is Bible Scribe. It's good to be back with you today. Enoch and his journey to Antarctica. This is something most Christians, most people in general, even the ones that study Enoch, don't really know about. And so I wanted to take the time. This is research that I did like 8-10 years ago. And I put it together in a format that's going to be interesting to you, I believe. But there is a story about Enoch and about what he does when he lives on Earth that is just incredible and points us to places on Earth like Antarctica. So we're going to go through this together today, and I wanted to show this to you. I think you'll be interested. It's one of those things like I wish someone would make a movie about this. But it's going to be a lot of fun, so stick with me here, and we're going to go through some interesting information that most people just don't know about. And it does tie in, of course, to the biblical narrative and historical accounts in the Bible. So thank you for joining me. This is going to be a lot of fun. Let me start to pull up the information here, and we will get going on Enoch's journey to Antarctica. So what I want to start with is I have this, it's essentially a web page, but it's a way I formatted this information so you could kind of see it. And if you can see on your screen here, I have paralleled the Bible on the far left and the Book of Jubilees in the center column, and done that with the Book of Jasher in the right column. So this page, if you will, of information, as we scroll down, this is what parts of those writings parallel each other, specifically in regards to the time when I put on here as my title, when men would multiply upon the earth. This means as soon as Adam and Eve were expelled from the garden and started having children, and you see the first story here listed as Cain and Abel, way up until the time just before the flood. So if we go all the way down here, it's the birth of Noah, right? So this is the time frame. It's a time period which the Bible is somewhat quiet about. Doesn't tell us a whole lot, but as you see as we scroll up there, the Bible does speak about things in very brief terms, whereas these other writings we're looking at, both the Book of Jubilees, the Book of Jasher, tend to have a lot more information about, different events during this time, like Adam's death, when Lamech was born, Noah's father, Enoch, and that's part of what we'll talk about. But just so you see what this is, as we go down through here, and we're mostly going to be reading in this right column from the account given in the Book of Jasher. And I would also recommend the Book of Jasher as an incredible read, especially the first, 10 chapters or so of Jasher, I believe. Past that, the Book of Jasher is pretty much in line. It's almost a parallel account with the Bible in the books of like Kings and Chronicles. So when it gets to all the wars between the Israelites and the different Canaanite nations, then it's, of course, very, simpatico. It lines right up. But in the earlier chapters of Jasher, like you can see here in this section right here, Jasher goes into a lot of detail, whereas both the Book of Jubilee and the Bible itself have a more brief, description of those times. So that's what we're looking at this morning. And so I'm going to skip over, there's, of course, these parts where Cain and Abel, and Cain slays Abel, and then Adam and Eve have Seth, and all this stuff occurs. And just see here in the Book of Jasher on the right here, in chapter 1, verse 34, Cain knew his wife in those days, and she conceived and bare a son, named him Enoch. And in that time, the Lord began to give him rest and quiet in the earth. And at that time, Cain also began to build a city. And the city he built, he named Enoch, according to the name of his son. And Irad was born to Enoch, and Irad begat Metuel, and Metuel begat Methusael. Just know right now, though, that this is not the Enoch that we're thinking of, that we're talking about. There was more than one Enoch, okay? This one was earlier than the one we're talking about, as far as I understand. And so as we go down here, we'll go further past Enosh and Canaan and Lamech's son, and the death of Cain, which is a very interesting story. You see here in the death of Cain how the book of Jasher has a lot of information, whereas the Bible has a very brief account of Cain's death. But and then I have this in red in Jubilees because the account does not match both the writing in Jasher and the Bible itself. So I have that in red as a possible conflict and a problematic, writing from the book of Jubilees. But we will keep going down here, and let me do something real quick. Okay, continuing. Okay, so now here in chapter 2, verse 37 of the book of Jasher, Jared lived 62 years, and he begat Enoch. So there was one Enoch that was begat by Cain, but this is the correct Enoch that we're thinking of, and he was begotten by Jared. Jared was his father. If you remember or have heard in the ancient writings in the book of Enoch and others about the, quote, days of Jared, this is what we're talking about. This is the time period. And this was also in many writings called the age of wickedness, especially in the book of Enoch, because men upon the earth were so wicked, doing so many horrible things, which a lot of them are being done on the earth right now. But it was quite different in that time, I believe. So we'll continue. We've got, Enoch being born here, but as we go down, here's where we want to start, and this section is I've called Enoch starts to teach and men make him king. So let's read a little bit here about Enoch and what he does as he grows up and becomes a man. It says, and the soul of Enoch was wrapped up in the instruction of the Lord, in knowledge and in understanding, so much so that he retired from the sons of men, meaning he went into hiding. Enoch did. He secreted himself away from them for many days. And it was at the expiration of many years, while he was serving the Lord and praying before him in his house, an angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, and he said, here I am. An angel said to him, rise, go forth from thy house, from the place where thou hide thyself, and appear to the sons of men, in order that you may teach them the ways in which they should go, and the work that they must do to enter the ways of God. So this angel comes to Enoch and says, go teach men how to obey me and how to obey God and do what's right. Because these were the days of wickedness, the age of wickedness. And Enoch rose up then, according to the word of the Lord, and went forth from his house, from his place, from the chamber where he was concealed, and he went to the sons of men. He taught them the ways of the Lord. And at that time he assembled them and acquainted them with all of the Lord's instructions. And he ordered it to be proclaimed all over the world, that when the sons of men, wherever they dwelt, that they would say, where is the man that wishes to know the ways of the Lord and good works? Let him come to Enoch. So apparently he had this message delivered all over the place. And so this is what people began to realize, that if they wanted to follow God, that Enoch was a source for that. And so all the sons of men assembled to him. For all who desired this thing went to Enoch, and Enoch reigned over these sons of men, and according to the word of the Lord, as they came and they bowed to him and they heard his word. So this is not saying that all mankind assembled to him, but that all the ones, as it says here, all the ones that desired this, meaning wanted to follow the Lord, they went to Enoch for instruction. So there were a lot, probably. And the Spirit of God, it says in chapter 3, verse 8 of Jasher, was upon Enoch. He taught all the men the wisdom of God and his ways, and the sons of men served the Lord all the days of Enoch, and they came to hear his wisdom. And all the kings of the sons of men, both the first and last, together with their princes and judges, came to Enoch when they heard this wisdom, and they bowed down to him. So even kings, so at this time, as these patriarchs, from Adam down to the time of Enoch, and Adam, by the way, is still alive at this time. So men had not even started dying yet from old age at this point, if you understand that, because of their lifespans. Adam lived to 930 years old. So at this time, Enoch was born and Adam was still alive. So as children were born to these patriarchs, and you saw earlier when we read about the first Enoch, and that Cain had a city named after him. Well, when that happened, these sons would go out and start cities, and they would be named after them. They would reign as the king over that city. And so that's what this is talking about. A lot of these kings from different cities of the sons of men, they came to Enoch for instruction on wisdom and learning the ways of the Lord. And they assembled all 130 kings and princes. They made Enoch king over them, and they were all under his power and his command, and he taught them wisdom, knowledge, and the ways of the Lord, and made peace among them. And peace was throughout the earth during the life of Enoch. So because of his teaching, there was a rash of peace that broke out through these men, these nations that did come. I shouldn't say the word nations, but these rulers and their peoples. Peace broke out for a while during Enoch's life because of his teaching and instruction that this angel of God had been sent to tell him to do, to spread the word and the knowledge of the Lord to these people. And Enoch, it says, reigned over the sons of men 243 years, and he did justice and righteousness with all his people and led them in the ways of the Lord. And so as we come down here, I did want to mention this because I had said just a minute ago that Adam was still alive. And so then after what we just read is the account of Adam's death. And of course, that's in the Bible in Genesis 5, verse 5. I believe that's Genesis. Yeah, I think so. If not, it's Exodus. But that's also recorded in the book of Jubilees and Jasher. But in Jasher, it says, it was in the 56th year of the life of Lamech, Noah's father, when Adam died, 930 years old at his death, with his two sons. Enoch and Methuselah, his son, buried him with a great pomp, as is the burial of kings, in the cave which God had told him. Now that's a very interesting statement there at the end, the cave which God had told him. And in the book of Jubilees, the way it says it is, Adam died, all his sons buried him in the land of his creation, and he was the first to be buried in the earth. So definitely Adam was the first to be buried, but he was buried in the land of his creation. The way Jasher says it is in the cave which God had told him. And if you've read the first book of Adam and Eve, you realize this cave has a name, and it's called the Cave of Treasures. It was the cave that God sent Adam and Eve into to live for shelter after they left the Garden of Eden. And of course, that's not recounted in the Bible per se, but it is in a few other writings about this cave of treasures. The reason it says treasures is because there was also given to Adam rods of gold and I believe frankincense and myrrh, the same items that were given to the Lord Jesus Christ when he was a baby, that were brought to him by the wise men. And why do you think they did that? Because they knew these stories. They knew the stories of what happened when Adam was sent out of the Garden of Eden. So the same things that God gave Adam in the cave of treasures, gold rods, frankincense, and myrrh, those are the same things that the wise men brought to Jesus' bedside when he was a baby, which is pretty amazing. So anyway, just wanted to go over that Adam did pass at this time. Now we're about to get into the most interesting part of Enoch's life and his journey, okay? So he had become this king, this source of knowledge, of wisdom about God on the earth in the time of wickedness before the flood of Noah, Okay. And so we'll keep going here in Jasher. It was in the year of Adam's death, which was the 243rd year of the reign of Enoch as the king. In that time, Enoch resolved to separate himself again from the sons of men and secret himself. So he again withdraws from men, from interaction with men, so that he can focus on God again. Okay, so this tells you the kind of man that Enoch was. So happy and focused on God and doing what God wanted that he would separate himself for days on end, studying, praying, doing these things. And Enoch did so, but did not entirely secret himself from them, but kept away from the sons of men for 3 days, and then went to them for 1 day. And during the 3 days that he was in the chamber, he prayed to and praised the Lord his God. And the day on which he went and appeared to his subjects, he taught them the ways of the Lord, and all they asked him about the Lord, he told them. And he did this in this manner for many years. He would conceal himself. Afterward, he would conceal himself for 6 days and appear to his people 1 day in 7. And after that, once in a month. And then after that, once in a year, until all the kings and the princes and sons of men sought for him, and desired again to see his face and hear his word, but they could not. As all the sons of men were greatly afraid of Enoch, and they feared to approach him on account of the godlike awe that was seated upon his countenance. Therefore no man could look at him, fearing he might be punished and die. So let me explain this to you. We read through stuff like that, and it's like, wait, what's going on? So Enoch starts to separate himself again from men. He would go away for a few days at first, just a few days, and come back for a day. And of course, people were waiting to see him in his court. Probably he had a palace type thing or something. And so people would come and wait for him to come back out so they could talk with him, hear his wisdom and instruction. And so at first it was just a few days at a time. He had to separate himself to get closer to God again. He'd come back out and give them information for a day or so, and then he'd go back in hiding. So the way it says that happened is at first it was for 3 days, then it became for 6 days, and then on a 7th he would come back, kind of like a Sabbath. But then after that he went to once a month and then once a year, because I think the way it sounds like it got to be too much for him. He wanted to separate more and be with God more. And it says they started to be afraid of Enoch, and the reason was his countenance, meaning his face, his visage, what he looked like, there was a godlike awe seated upon him. Now, we have references to this kind of thing in different writings. For one, when we have some fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls that say that when Noah was born, his parents thought he was part Nephilim because he glowed. He literally had light coming out from him. And this is the type of thing I think that we're reading here, that Enoch, as he grew closer to God and was more involved with spiritual things, that he started to get a countenance, a brightness. And so it was visible. It was real. And when he would come out after being holed up in his secret chamber for a month or a year, and he would sit on his throne, he was literally glowing. And so that's the best way I can describe it. So the men who were coming to see him started to be afraid. They started to fear that. They didn't understand. And you can imagine if they're continually coming again and again that, the reality is when you're learning about God, if you really are absorbing it, then it's not as much about who's giving it to you, but it's about you being closer to God. But these men were coming back again and again. It sounds like maybe they weren't totally getting it. They just wanted to hear Enoch speak, right? And that might have been part of why Enoch wanted to separate himself away. But he started to get this countenance, a visage, where he was actually literally glowing from probably the closeness to God that he experienced and the spirituality he was practicing. So we'll continue now. Verse 21 in chapter 3 of the book of Jasher. All the kings and princes resolved to assemble the sons of men and come to Enoch, thinking they might all speak to him at the time when he would come forth. And they did so. And the day came when he went forth, and they all assembled. So they all came at once, like all of them, to try to catch him when he came out of his chamber. And Enoch spoke to them the words of the Lord, and taught them wisdom and knowledge. They bowed down before him and said, "May the king live, may the king live." So that, again, sounds kind of like they were almost worshiping Enoch, which was obviously not what God wanted, probably. But that was kind of what was happening. So now we're going to get into some of the interesting stuff. And where I say Antarctica, this is kind of where some of that's going to come into play, okay? So in some time after this, when the kings and princes of the sons of men were speaking to Enoch, and Enoch was teaching them the ways of God, behold, an angel then called to Enoch from heaven and wished to bring him up there to reign over the sons of God, as he had reigned over the sons of men on earth. So Enoch had so proved himself in reigning over the men on earth and teaching them the Lord's ways that the angel said that God wanted him in heaven to do that for the sons, quote, sons of God, which are the angels. He wanted him to come up and be a king over angels. And when at this time Enoch heard this, and went and assembled the inhabitants of the earth, and taught them wisdom and knowledge, and said to them, I've been required to ascend to heaven, and I do not know when I will be going. Now therefore I will teach you wisdom and knowledge, and will give you instruction before I leave you, how to act upon the earth. And he taught them wisdom and knowledge, and reproved them, taught them everlasting life, and dwelt with them some time, teaching them all these things. And at that time the sons of men were with Enoch, and Enoch was speaking to them, and they lifted up their eyes, and the likeness of a great horse descended from heaven. The horse paced in the air. And Enoch told what they had seen, or they told Enoch what they saw, and Enoch said, on my account this horse comes. It was the horse that would likely be taking him to heaven. The time has come, he says, where I must go from you, and shall no more be seen by you. And the horse descended and stood before Enoch, and all the sons of men with Enoch saw him. And when Enoch again ordered the voice to be proclaimed, saying, where is the man who delights to know the ways of the Lord? Let him come this day to Enoch before he is taken from us. And the sons of men gathered and came to Enoch that day, where all the kings of earth and princes and counselors remained with him. And Enoch taught them all the wisdom and the knowledge and the divine instructions, and bade them to serve the Lord, and made peace among them. And it was after this that he rose up and rode upon the horse and went forth, and all the sons of men went after him, about 800,000 men. They went with him one day's journey. So think about this. This horse descends from heaven and stands on the ground before Enoch. And Enoch says, this is it, guys. I'm going to have to go. I'm going to heaven. And he teaches them for this day as this horse stands by waiting. And then at the end of the teaching, he says, now I'm going. And he gets on the horse and starts riding. Now he doesn't go up in the sky. He starts riding along the ground, and what happens? About 800,000 men all get on their horses, and they start following. They want to stay with Enoch. They don't want him to go, or they at least want to see where he's going or go with him. So that's what it says. They went with him one day's journey. And where's he going? That's what's interesting. That's what we're about to get to. On the second day, he said to them, return home to your tents. Why would you go? Perhaps you will die. Because he knew he was going to heaven. He's like, you may die trying to get to where I'm going. And some of them went from him, meaning they left and went back home. But those that remained with him went 6 days more journey. And Enoch said to them every day, return to your tents, you may die. But they were not willing, and they went with him. So this is where it's getting interesting, guys. On the 6th day, some of the men remained and clung to him, and they said, we will go with thee to the place where thou goest, as the Lord lives. Death only shall separate us. They were willing to die to see if they could go where Enoch was going. And they urged him so much that he ceased speaking to them, and they went after him and would not return. And when the kings returned, they caused a census to be taken in order to know the number of remaining men that had gone with Enoch. And it was upon the 7th day that Enoch ascended into heaven with a whirlwind, with horses and chariots of fire. So wherever he went to on that 7th day, he did ascend, and there were more horses and chariots and fire and all this stuff, okay? And on the 8th day, then, so the men were still out there. On the 8th day, all the kings that had been with Enoch sent to bring back the number of men that were with Enoch in that place from which he ascended into heaven. So this place where he ascended, they sent more men to bring back the ones that had gone with Enoch, okay? And all those kings went to the place where they found the earth there filled with snow. Wow. So now are we talking about a place like Antarctica? And upon the snow were large stones of snow. And one said to the other, "Come, let us break through the snow and see. Perhaps the men that remained with Enoch are dead and now under the stones of snow." And they searched for them, but they could not find them. Or they searched, but could not find Enoch, for he had ascended into heaven. All the days that Enoch had lived upon the earth were 365 years. So this is the type of thing that makes you think, where did he go? They went 7 days' journey. He was on a angelic horse, if you will, a horse from heaven. And they traveled 7 days' journey out into the, quote, I don't know, wilderness, but it was a place filled with snow. And upon the snow were large stones of snow. Does that kind of make you think of what my background is like here? Like this? I mean, that's why I say, is this Antarctica we're talking about? It obviously was a long journey. It was a long way away from where they were. And so it just makes you wonder, where exactly were they? Now there's a possibility we could be talking about the Arctic as well. The Arctic being the northernmost place they could go. So they could have just headed north. The Arctic being straight directly under the North Star, which, by the way, never moves out of its place in the heavens. Perhaps that's the place where Enoch ascended into heaven. But either way, this is just interesting to know. And I mean, the whole story of Enoch is incredible, but it does make you think, some of the things we hear and know about places like Antarctica, they're so strange and mysterious. So many weird things go on there, especially with, people who are rulers in our world. And the mystery that surrounds the events that have occurred in places like that. It just makes you think perhaps there's significance there, even in our modern time, but especially back then during Enoch's time. And this might be a connection that helps us understand that a little more. So finishing up then, we're almost done probably with what it has to say about Enoch's life here. But continuing in the book of Jasher, chapter 4, verse 2, when Enoch had ascended to heaven, the kings of the earth rose and took Methuselah his son and anointed him the king. Okay, Methuselah, by the way, is the quote, oldest man that ever lived, right? Because I think it was, he had lived before he died 969 years, if I'm not mistaken. And so this is that Methuselah. It's Enoch's son. So they caused him to reign over the place of his father Enoch. And Methuselah acted uprightly in the sight of God as his father had told him. And likewise during his life taught the sons of men wisdom. He taught them knowledge, the fear of God, and did not turn from the good way, either to the right or to the left. So this was good. Enoch and Methuselah had good reigns over the people and helped promote peace and following God. But in the latter days of Methuselah, the sons of men turned from the Lord. They corrupted the earth. They robbed and plundered each other. They rebelled against God and transgressed. They corrupted their ways and would not hearken to the voice of Methuselah any longer and rebelled against him. And the Lord was exceedingly wroth against them, and he continued to destroy the seed in those days. So there was neither sowing nor reaping on the earth. And this is essentially a reference to the curse of the land that occurred because of Adam's sin in the garden. Do you remember that when Adam and Eve took the fruit from the serpent and ate it? God said, "I now curse the ground for your sake, Adam." that it would bring forth thistles, and you would have to work it, and it would not bring forth good food for you. And so that is what this is talking about. The Lord continued that issue on the earth. For when they sowed the ground in order to obtain food for their support, behold, again, thorns and thistles were produced, which they did not sow. Do you see how these writings confirm each other? This confirms what the Bible says, what Genesis says about how God cursed the land. And so it confirms those things. All of these writings confirm each other. Whether there's slight issues here or there, like I mentioned with the death of Cain, the book of Jubilees gives a slightly different account of the death of Cain than these other books. Does that mean we should throw that book out and never look at it? No. It only means we should be smart and aware of the differences and consider those when we are trying to come up with what we think is the correct narrative. Which in the case of Cain's death, I think the correct narrative is the Bible and in Jasher. I don't think that the narrative in Jubilees is the correct one. So anyway, to move on. Still the sons of men did not turn from their evil ways, and their hands were extended to do evil in the sight of God, and they provoked the Lord with their evil ways, and the Lord was wroth, and he repented that he had made man. And that echoes what's in the Bible as well. He was sorry that he had made man on the earth. And he thought to destroy and annihilate them, and he did so. Of course, that has to do with what's coming next in these writings, which is the death of Seth, but then the birth of Noah, whose name means comfort, and who then would, of course, lead humanity through the flood. The remnant that was saved was Noah's family that came out of the flood and then started humanity over again. And so that is really the whole testimony I had from Enoch. But again, just back to this interesting portion where Enoch travels into the wilderness, far, far away from civilization. And he is followed by all these different kings and princes and people of the earth who got so much from his instruction about the Lord and what they were supposed to act like during that age of wickedness on earth before the flood. And he goes out on this spiritual, angelic steed, and he rides this horse 7 days out into these farthest reaches of the earth where there's just snow and ice blocks everywhere. I mean, it just makes you think, what is this and what does this all mean and how does it connect to our reality now? But such an amazing story. Enoch is, of course, taken to heaven where, as the angel said to him, he was going to reign over the sons of God, over the angels in heaven, after he had done so well reigning over the men on earth. So I just wanted to bring that story to you for your edification, your interest, to spark interest. If you haven't read the book of Jasher, again, I do recommend it. It's an incredible corroboration with the Bible. And it's something that probably every Christian should read. There's a lot of good information in there also about the Nephilim and the giants and the different infractions that were going on with angels and humans at that time. So I just wanted to bring that all to your attention. This is a fun study that I did years ago, and I think is important and interesting for our time right now. These are also, to me, days of wickedness that we need to be aware. We need to be close to the Lord in these times. Just as Enoch drew away from men so he could get close to God, maybe sometimes we should do that as well. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for listening and your interest. And I just pray that God blesses you in your study of these things and more. Take care.